In 383 AD, the Roman Empire teetered on a precarious edge, its former grandeur clashing with the harsh reality of impending collapse. The once formidable legions, whose glory echoed throughout the world, no longer commanded the awe they once did. Barbarian tribes, such as the Goths and Vandals, increasingly breached the weakened borders, sowing chaos and destruction. Meanwhile, within the empire's flourishing cities, a corrosion of morals undermined the very foundations of society, replacing the once unyielding discipline that had propelled Rome to the pinnacle of power with rampant corruption. In this atmosphere of widespread decline, with the moral fabric of society utterly eroded, a scandal erupted that plunged the ancient world's very capital into disarray. This was no mere tale of plunder or another barbarian raid. The horror stemmed from the least expected source, the very heart of one of Rome's most distinguished and influential families, the Claudians. What transpired within the walls of their opulent home was so monstrous and repulsive that even seasoned chroniclers, accustomed to detailing the most incredible excesses of the imperial court, from Caligula's madness to Nero's whims, shuddered as they took up their pens to record this atrocity for posterity. Ancient archives of the historian Ammianus Marcellinus, carefully preserved in the Vatican Library, recount the story of a man named Maximinus, a senator, a respected patrician, a wealthy landowner, and the direct heir to a lineage tracing back to Emperor Augustus himself. Maximinus was, in the eyes of the common people, the embodiment of the ideal Roman, a paragon of virtue and honor. However, those who knew him intimately saw him as a cruel domestic tyrant, whose depravity and wickedness knew no bounds and surpassed even the wildest imaginings. Beyond all limits, the story of Maximinus represents not merely an accumulation of power and immense wealth, but a sinister deployment of these for the perversion of justice, the destruction of ancient family ties, and the tragic fate inflicted upon his own offspring, forever etched into the grim pages of Rome's decline. His name was expunged from the annals of history, and his property consigned to ruin, yet documents, like fragments of the past, survived to convey to us the truth that the Roman Empire had vainly attempted to bury. Reader, prepare yourself. The forthcoming narrative is neither a figment of imagination nor an exaggeration, but a truthful portrayal of how insatiable ambition and moral decay take root and flourish luxuriantly where there is no restraining force. Maximinus, hailing from the noble Claudian family, was an extraordinary individual. Since the reign of Augustus, his family had provided the empire with senators, consuls, and military commanders who held the highest offices of state. By birthright, he owned vast lands in Campania, luxurious villas on the Palatine Hill, and control over mines in Spain, which generously supplied the empire with gold and silver. However, Maximinus's true gift lay in his masterful ability to navigate the intricate labyrinths of the Roman Senate. Ambitious and calculating, he skillfully exploited the internal strife that plagued the empire during that era. When the eastern provinces rebelled against Emperor Theodosius, Maximinus was among the few senators who remained loyal to the monarch. This loyalty did not go unnoticed and was richly rewarded. New appointments, honors, and a privileged place at imperial ceremonies became his recompense. In the eyes of the populace, Maximinus epitomized Roman austerity, whilst to his enemies, he was a figure who inspired awe rather than revulsion. His influence permeated even his personal life. Within the walls of his Roman domus, home to over 200 slaves and freedmen, he reigned like a minor emperor. Mosaic panels adorning the corridors, discovered by archaeologists centuries later, depicted scenes of exotic hunting amusements, endless feasts, and frivolous dances. This space was designed not only to impress guests, but also to unequivocally demonstrate that within these walls, Maximinus's will was absolute law. In this splendor grew Lucius, his only son, born of his first marriage, his mother having died in childbirth. From his earliest years, Lucius became the object of his father's obsessive care. Accounts from slaves, preserved to this day, indicate that he was forbidden to interact with other Roman boys his age. His world was confined to the gardens, fountains, and corridors of the family villa. Maximinus kept him under constant surveillance, surrounding him with personal guards who accompanied him even during the most mundane strolls. However, Maximinus's maniacal drive extended beyond mere protection. In judicial annals discovered in the archives of the city prefect, it is recorded how this senator cultivated a peculiar, almost innovative, system of upbringing. Instead of instructing Lucius in the virtues befitting a young aristocrat, oratory, martial prowess, state administration, he subjected him to an education focused on domestic and feminine pursuits, embroidery, dancing, chamber music, and the art of organizing feasts. The Hellenic tutor, Aristophanes, summoned to instruct the boy, poured out his bewilderment regarding Maximinus's instructions on papyri found in Oxyrhynchus. "I am not permitted," he wrote, "to teach him to think like a Roman youth or to address the people. I am only to cultivate in him the grace of a maiden preparing for marriage." The isolation and perverse upbringing swiftly took their toll. Slaves attested that by the age of 12, Lucius already donned female attire, adorned himself with jewels and perfumes, and styled his hair like noble matrons. The influential patrician Maximinus was obsessed with the idea of transforming his son, Lucius, into a living work of art, a masterpiece entirely conforming to his design. Any manifestation of individuality, any deviation from this rigid plan, was mercilessly suppressed. The slightest attempt by Lucius to behave like ordinary youths his age was met with severe punishments, prolonged periods of starvation and confinement in the darkest rooms of the family villa. Under the weight of such tyranny, Lucius's personality underwent monstrous changes. By the age of 16, he had become a semblance of a young noblewoman. Frescoes discovered during excavations of the villa's ruins depict him in a stola and palla, traditional female garments worn by women of his class. Moreover, surviving records from the College of Physicians in Rome bear witness to contemporary suspicions that Maximinus might have resorted to hormonal treatments to artificially alter his son's physical development. The outcome of these manipulations was truly tragic. The young man was morally broken, trapped between the identity imposed upon him and the all-consuming shadow of his despotic father. Historians and chroniclers documenting these sorrowful events unanimously affirm that long before the notorious scandal erupted, the tragedy was already deeply etched into Lucius's mutilated body and tormented mind. Yet, the most dreadful was still to come, for Maximinus did not limit himself to total control over his son's life. His plans for Lucius's future, once he reached maturity, surpassed anything Rome had ever witnessed, astonishing even the most jaded and cynical inhabitants of the empire. In the autumn of 382 AD, Rome was shaken by news that seemed the product of a deranged mind. Maximinus, a senator from the influential Claudian family, publicly declared his intention to marry his son, Lucius. This announcement was disseminated not in whispers behind backs, but with pomp and openness. Confident in his power and impunity, Maximinus dispatched messengers to the Senate and hosted feasts at which he publicly proclaimed his decision. The chronicles of those years, particularly the works of Sozomen and Philostorgius, recorded universal astonishment. The empire had never witnessed such an act. Patrician families were divided. Some remained silent, fearing the loss of trade connections with the Claudians, whilst others immediately severed all ties, horrified by what they considered an affront not only to Roman morality, but also to the Christian faith, which was gradually gaining strength at Emperor Theodosius's court. The wedding preparations were as lavish as they were sinister. Maximinus ordered a wedding dress for Lucius, fashioned from purple silk imported from Constantinople itself, and adorned with gold threads from Dacia, an outfit whose cost was equivalent to the annual upkeep of an entire legion. The banquet was to last 3 days and include performances by musicians, acrobats, and gladiatorial contests. All this magnificence was financed by gold extracted from the Spanish mines belonging to the Claudian family. However, beneath the outward splendor and magnificence of the celebration lay a grim reality. Slaves who served the villa and whose testimonies are preserved in court records vividly described Lucius's state of mind leading up to the marriage. He suffered uncontrollable fits of weeping, periods of complete silence, and panic attacks triggered by the mere mention of the impending union. Some of them claimed that at night the young man, as if wound up, repeated the same phrase, full of despair, "I am not who he makes me out to be." On the day the ceremony was to take place, the lavish villa was overflowing with distinguished guests, senators, political appointees, and high-ranking officials who trembled before Maximinus's omnipotence and dared not decline his invitation. None of them wished to be associated with this cruel man, but they feared incurring his wrath even more. Christian priests, known for their principles, flatly refused to perform the rite, and so the enraged senator turned to a priest of Mithras, a follower of the Eastern cult, which at that time still enjoyed relative tolerance. This man was named Gaius Valerius Maximus, and for his participation in this scandalous act, he was later sent into exile in distant Gaul. Lucius appeared before the astonished guests, clad in a white stola and wedding veil, with skillfully applied makeup and numerous rings on his slender fingers. According to eyewitnesses, he resembled a pale shadow rather than a living person full of hope and joy. During the ceremony, the unfortunate young man began to convulse and fell into a state of catatonic stupor, completely losing the ability to speak or move. But Maximinus, as if possessed, forced him to continue, cynically assuring those present that his spouse was simply overcome with excitement and happiness. The consummation of the marriage, as archival records attest, devolved into a repulsive farce, enacted in the presence of specially selected witnesses. Maximinus, striving to justify his actions, resorted to archaic and arbitrary interpretations of Roman law. That night forever stained the history of the senatorial class with a dark atrocity. The reaction was immediate. Influential families severed all ties with the Claudians, and sordid rumors of what had occurred reached the imperial palace. Emperor Theodosius, yielding to pressure from conservative senators and Christian advisers, ordered an official investigation. However, even before the legal process began, Roman society expressed its indignation. The chronicles of those years convey accounts of unrest in the Roman Forum. Enraged citizens demanded justice and threatened to take matters into their own hands against Maximinus if the courts failed to act. The Praetorian Guard was forced to encircle the Claudian house to prevent popular anger. What Maximinus had intended as a demonstration of unlimited power became his death sentence. The Senate, the people, and even the emperor himself turned against him. But the most alarming portent was that Lucius, the silenced victim, was soon to testify against the man who had broken his life. In the spring of 383 AD, a scandal erupted that could no longer be ignored. Emperor Theodosius, yielding to pressure from both conservative senators and influential Christian bishops, ordered an official investigation into Maximinus's activities and the events that had transpired in his luxurious domus, once belonging to the Claudians. Flavius Abundantius, a Praetorian prefect known for his incorruptibility and honesty, was appointed to conduct the investigation. He faced a difficult task, as Maximinus had amassed enormous wealth and knew how to use it for bribery and intimidation. The first witnesses called to court were found dead in the streets of Rome with signs of brutal torture, serving as an ominous warning. Death awaits anyone who dares to testify against the senator. Meanwhile, those who could challenge the legality of the inheritance mysteriously disappeared. They were pursued by false accusations, sent into exile, or secretly executed.